Good afternoon, good evening to all. Some of you on the West Coast, good afternoon. And to those in the East Coast, good evening. And to those that are listening overseas, good evening also, or good morning. Um, Model Man Frank here. Here in the United States, we had our Independence Day this weekend. And I hope everybody who had Independence Day holiday. I hope you all had a great time. And I wanted to say hello to y'all. Today we have a unique show for us tonight. Um, if you're watching this on playback, you'll get a treat that I've been wanting to do for the longest time. And just to let you know, yes, it's going to be about the B-26, the AB-26 invader, but it's also going to be about a little bit about Cuban aviation and a little bit about the Bay of Pigs. Where I get most of my information about the Bay of Pigs is from family, preferably my father, who lived in Cuba uh, from the time of his birth all the way up until 1961. And I try and remember as much as I can from other people that my father knows and my grandfather knew and the stories that they've told me, and from my mother from what she's told me in the past. My mother's memory is not so great, so she can't remember too many things of what happened when she was growing up living in Cuba. So I went to my dad instead. The A-26 is one of those aircraft that was used in many different conflicts. It was used from World War II, from when it was invented. EQRC, I see you there. Welcome. Hi, how you doing? Thanks for joining in. I know. Hope you're able to stay for the whole show. Because if not, you can watch it on playback and you'll see what I have in store. Like I said, the AB-26, it was known as the B-26, but there was another aircraft during World War II was also known as the B-26 also, which was the Marauder. They had no relations in each other. The Martin Marauder it had a lot of problems. Douglas came out with the B-26, their version. Hey Norm, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. So you had the A-26 and the B-26, the AB model of Douglas. B-26 Martin Marauder was a totally different aircraft. One had straight wings, that was the Marauder. The Invader had a slight dihedral to it. The B-26 Invader, as it was going to be known, and has had a long distinctive career. World War II, it came in towards the later half of World War II, 1943, 44, and 45. After that, it flew in Korea and worked as a pathfinder in Korea for bombers and a night fighter. And then into the early parts of Vietnam, it became a counter B-26, which became a serious workhorse. But the aircraft was used heavily in overseas operations. The plane was used, again, also in the Bay of Pigs invasion, as we all know. Castro had a couple of B-26s, but like I'm going to tell you right now, Castro had the glass nose B-26, which was the bomber version. It was an older model. The CIA operatives who flew the B-26 in the invasion had the solid nose with the 850 caliber machine guns for strafing. Castro's versions had the underwing pods and they actually had guns in the wing itself, not just the pods on the bottom. They had the wings and Some of them had them in the nose, and they were glass nosed or plexiglass nosed. Just to give you guys just break off from where I'm going in with this. If you guys, as you see, I have on the corner here is Patreon. It's free to sign up. I am on Patreon. When I do the rough cut of what I'm thinking of doing, which will be a documentary style interview about the history of my grandfather and my father and his family all the way up to 1961 until they left Cuba. It will be on Patreon first. I will later put it on YouTube after a week of being on Patreon, and then it will go on also Rumble, which is another page that I have, and I do have some members that follow me there. But I normally just post videos on Rumble. I don't do the live sessions on Rumble. Rumble's a different site altogether. It's really become more for politics and everything like that, and for some documentaries. So I will post this. So basically what happened was my dad came to visit this past weekend because it was 4th of July weekend. So we got to talking about the B-26 and the Invader, and I said, listen, I want to sit down and have a conversation with you about Cuba before the Bay of Pigs and leading up to it. So we came in here and I videotaped him through about an hour session of talking to him about what he remembered and a little bit about the history of my grandfather. And I think it's really important for others to hear. Cuba was just not known for just the Bay of Pigs. There was a rich aviation history in Cuba, and Cuba was a place for entrepreneurs like my grandfather. So I'm going to play a bit of that video today, one section of it, so you guys can hear what conspired during that invasion. But first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the B-26, and then we'll go into that video, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up. Okay? So, talking about the B-26, I'm going to just close this window here a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit more just about the B-26 itself. Now, the BA-26, the B being the bomber version and the A being the attack version. There were two different versions of this aircraft. Both had the same motors. Both basically filled the same role. During the war, the B version and the A version were heavily used. You could carry, so you had your pilot, your navigator, your bombardier, and your gunner. You could be between 3 and 4 personnel on board. The aircraft was developed to replace the aging Douglas A-20 Havoc. The only thing is that Douglas, along with the Roosevelt administration and the Lend-Lease program, did not allow the Allies to get a hold of the B-26. There was a reason for that. It was a state-of-the-art aircraft in the way it was designed and built. The plane was built around speed, number one, to penetrate its target and to get in and out very quickly, almost like sorry guys, I'm having a brain fart. I'm getting old, just like everybody else does, right? Like the Mosquito, which is its British predecessor, which is its British equivalent. The Mosquito was built, it was a wooden wonder, and it was built around speed. Speed and maneuverability, and the way it was designed. So, here is a little bit of the history and the chronicle of the B-26 and the way it was coming out. So you had, excuse me guys, I'm looking for my book that I had set out so I could use my notes. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Y'all like that when I have to just walk away from my reading to tell you guys what I'm looking for. So, in this diagram, you see the XA-26. So the XA-26, when it first came out, you can tell what it had differently from the B-26, A-26 models that you see now in photos. It had a glass canopy, glass nose. The bird cage wasn't so it wasn't rounded like the original, like the ones that you see now. I don't think any of the older models really exist still. The nose cones on it, on the engines, they weren't providing enough. They were actually heating the engine up. So even though that was on the aircraft during testing, it didn't stay on the testing. It also helped take those off because it allowed the aircraft to be better maintained. You had the XA-26A, the XA-26B. The B model of the XA-26 had a solid nose, still with the flat canopy cover, which was more not really like a bird cage style look, but it didn't provide enough lookup for pilots to be able to look around them and see. You had a couple of little windows, and that's really about it. When we got into the A-26, the B later models, that's when they changed the canopy completely. No longer was it a window, a canopy that opened like this. It was a clamshell. So you would open the canopy. Actually, I'm sorry, the canopy opened this way. Okay, and the pilot could get in and out through the top, or could get in through a door that was in the front of the cockpit. If you watch the movie Always, you'll actually see the door being utilized in that model. Yes, you could climb up to the side of the aircraft and get in through the top wing route and climb into it like a fighter, or you could come in through the belly of the plane where the bomber station was, and you could crawl in through there and get up inside the aircraft. The C models, they started to come out with better technology. The A-26C model was a glass canopy. That was the bomber version. Interesting note. On the later A-26B model, you can see on that nose, you can see that the aircraft, let me see if I can bring this up. Actually, I've got another photo that I'd like to show you guys. And I'll actually show you what I'm talking about with the nose of this aircraft. Bear with me one moment here. So you can see the glass, the nose sections on these aircraft. This is the JD1 version, which was a solid nose. It had a kind of like a plexiglass cap, but that nose would actually have cannons in it. This one's totally different. But you had the glass canopy, which was that plexi nose. There are B-26 flying around today that are mostly with that nose. I believe Current Weeks has the one with the 4 cannons, and there are some static display models that show the 4 cannons in the front. I'm sorry, 8 cannons in the front. There were 50 caliber machine guns on that aircraft. It was a very deadly plane. You did not want to be on the wrong side of that aircraft when it came in for the kill. I'm just going to shrink this a little bit. So you got to remember this aircraft had the same speed as a P-51 Mustang. It had the same speed as a Mustang. It had, you could get into a dogfight with this aircraft if you could. It's just very heavy. It's a very heavy plane. It's a, it's a 2-engine aircraft. So it was a little hard to get into a dogfight with it. But if you needed to get away from somebody, you could. With the the 8 cannons in the front, you could turn around your upper turret and turn that, which would also have 2 cannons. So you would have 8 plus another 2. You'd have 10 cannons facing. And if you had room for the guns pods on the front, the underwing gun pods didn't really do. They provided a lot of drag. So later models, there were some that were being used in the Pacific, and some that were being used in the war during Korea, that had the guns actually mounted in the wing, just like a fighter plane, and then they would have to shoot out the bottom of the wing. There are photos in the squadron signal that do show some of those models, but I think there's, in the upgraded one there was. Castro had the ones in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Central American countries had the ones with the gun pods on the bottom. It's still, they found a workaround, but they made it work for them. So this aircraft went into Korea. It had a successful career in Korea, fighting the war, winning. Not really. Remember, Korea became more of a stalemate. But as we went from Korea and into Vietnam, came out the counter invader, which was black bottom of the aircraft, top of the aircraft was painted in camouflage. The length of the aircraft stayed the same, 71 feet. Wingspan stayed from wingtip to wingtip, and that was including the wing tanks, which added extra range, was 71 feet. 6 inches. And then, yes, there is a B-26 at the Fantasy of Flight in Florida. It had a length of 51 feet. So you're looking at around when this aircraft was built and designed, they kind of got design cues from the B-25 and the Douglas A-20 Havoc. But instead of having your pilot and then you really just had a pilot and a navigator or a gunner, you had a crew of 3. They really wanted to make sure that this aircraft would have the speed, and you could have an extra pilot next to you if you needed to have one. So you could put an actual co-pilot's station there, or you could just have the bomber, the bombardier. Maximum speed of this aircraft was 327 miles an hour, close to the speed of a Mustang. Service ceiling was 30,500 feet. Range was 2,700 miles. Could go to and from Europe, landing in Britain. It had a crew of 3 going. This was for the counter version. The bomber version, the A version that was used during World War II and used during the Korean War had a crew of 4. So you had to have somebody operate the guns. There was one guy that would operate the gun in the back. You'd have 2 people. You could fit 2 people in the front if you had a radar operator or a bombardier. And you would have a co-pilot if you had to. It was either a crew of 3 or a crew of 4, depending. The power plant on this aircraft was a 2,852 width Pratt & Whitney 2,500 horsepower radial engines. Really powerful motor. Really did its work, providing Allied cover. The counter invader was used during the night operations in Vietnam. They were used successfully, but towards the middle portion, as we started to get more involved in Vietnam, they started to get scaled back because the jets were coming in, and it was going to be a bloodbath with that. I do believe, I think the Vietnamese had a couple. South Vietnam Air Force had them, and the CIA was using some of them aircraft. Castro had a couple of the planes. Now, where I'm going to go with this, with the Cuban Bay of Pigs role, is I'm just going to show you a shot of a piece of the video that I have taken with my dad, and I'm not exactly sure which one it's going to be, but I know you guys will like it. First things first, this is one of the books that I got a lot of information from. This was a friend of my uncle's who wrote this book. Here's the video of it, Operation Puma. This book is not sold anywhere. You could probably find some copies on eBay if you want to look around on thrift stores and things like that. I'll put a I'll see if I can find it on thrift stores. If I find the link, I'll put it in the description box below this video. This is the gentleman that wrote the book. He was in the Bay of Pigs. Also, another book that I'm referring to is this one here, Brilliant Disaster. Let's face it, Bay of Pigs was a brilliant disaster. On paper, it looked like something that was going to be successful, but in the end, it wasn't. The whole thing with Castro and everything that happened was... The principle was a great idea, but the execution was a disaster itself. Let me see if I can get this video uploaded for you guys, and I'm going to show you. I really do want to bring you guys onto this. I'm going to first show you a B-26 that I got video of. Somebody posted, and I want you guys to see it so you guys can see if it'll show. Hopefully y'all can hear it with those big radial engines roaring. That's it for that one. All right, let me see if I can get my father on here so we can listen to a part of this interview, and then we'll in this part of the interview, he is going to be talking about I'll stay silent while the video is playing, so you won't hear my mic too much. I'm actually going to put my mic on mute while the video is playing so you guys can hear more of the video itself. I guess my volume is up. Thank you. Sorry about that, EQRC. So I'm going to play the video, stay silent. What he's describing is what happened in the days before Castro took over and a little bit afterwards. So we're going to go into that aspect, and that's the video I'm going to show you, this clip. So you guys get a sense of what was going on in Cuba during this time period. Again, this is part of a larger video that I will be making, and I've already started piecing it together. I'm going through old photographs. I'm going through my 2 books here. I've got some history, and I'm also going through a lot of video, and it's going to be a pretty long discussion, and I'll let you guys, hear the whole thing. If this is the first time you're listening to our video, please subscribe, hit the bell icon on the subscription. You'll be alerted when a video pops up of mine, and you'll be able to watch it. If you can, guys, I implore you, please share the video, like the video, etc. As we go, here we go. When did the Bay of Pigs, the 5 days leading up to the Bay of Pigs, when did you find out? Because I know it was dark. Media was owned by the government by this time. When did you find out that there was an invasion going on?
Actually, unfortunately, we knew that there was an invasion in the making very early, which means that Fidel also knew it.
So 1963, it was 1961. 61 is when it started wording about.
Let me explain it to you. About 1960 already, there was a lot of Cubans that have left Cuba already. People with money, people without money. The wealthy of Cuba were not the only ones that left the island. There were students, there were teachers, there were workers, and they all obviously came through Miami. The CIA had started even before Kennedy got elected in 1960 under the Eisenhower administration. They were pretty convinced that Nixon was going to win in 1960, and they had set up a program to basically topple Fidel. They started by recruiting Cuban military individuals. They infiltrated to do sabotage in Cuba, so on and so forth. But then they started, when Castro manifested that it was a socialist communist revolution, they actually set up in motion the program that would eventually become Bay of Pigs. Talking about 1960. They had started before, but it really took shape in early 1960. They set up training bases in the Everglades, and then training bases in Guatemala and in Nicaragua. Nicaragua because it was the port, Puerto Cabezas. In Guatemala, where some of my friends from military school went to, they had the airport where they trained the pilots for the bombers and for the C-46s for the parachute regiment, and also for the ground forces that would be landing from the ships once they took off from Nicaragua. You're talking about the beginning of 61. Everybody knew that something was going on. Everybody knew that if you left Cuba, chances are you would be aware of Miami that the CIA was recruiting for an eventual invasion. The issue was what that was going to be was how much was the U.S. going to be involved in it, how big was it going to be, where is it going to be, and whether there's going to be one invasion or multiple ones. The plan that actually the Kennedys inherited when they took over in January of 61, a mere 5 months before the invasion, was pretty much cast in stone. They were going to invade a town called Trinidad in the south of Cuba because, number one, it gave access to the hills in central Cuba. Number two, it had a port. Number three, it had a good airport. And they felt that it could actually take it and cut off any attempts to counterattack from the Cuban government. Just as a historical aside, by that time, the Cuban government had actually trained significant amounts of military people on the Russian sponsorship. It happened that the individual that ran the training for artillery was an individual who originally came from Spain, and he was actually one of my instructors in military school for infantry. He was a specialist in artillery. He was a Spaniard. So at the last minute, the Kennedy administration, number one, they started having second thoughts about U.S. involvement. Even though they deployed a Navy detachment, which I believe was the Boxer, the original aircraft carrier, not the modern version of the Boxer, in south of Cuba, with submarines and some air assets like A-4s and a few other aircraft. The gross on the invasion was about 2,000 people, 2,000 trainers. The objective was that once they landed, they would have enough people already in the island that could add to the fighting force, and they would be able to arm this. They were bringing arms. There were 5 ships. 2 of the ships that had the heavy arms actually were the first to be sunk. When just before the invasion, some of the softening took place. The Monday of the invasion, April 17th, was preceded by 5 days of activity. One of them was in Havana. They burned a couple of very large stores as acts of sabotage. Saturday morning, 48 hours before the invasion, B-26s flying from Nicaragua came and strafed and attacked the main air base in Havana, Colombia, which was the headquarters of the Cuban Air Force and Army. Destroyed some. Santiago de Cuba, close to where I grew up, close to the naval base. Also, they destroyed a couple of aircraft. And some of the planes actually, instead of flying back to Nicaragua, came to Key West and Miami. And they tried to create the image or the impression that there were defectors from the Cuban Air Force. At that point, the issue became for the American government to face the fact that this was already going on, and the Cuban government knew that these guys were not really Cuban pilots from the Cuban government, but Cuban exiles flying out of Nicaragua. So Bobby Kennedy, who was Attorney General and the right-hand man of his brother JFK, decided that they would not allow those planes to take off again, because the planes only came here to refuel. They would go back to Nicaragua, rearm, and then join the main force. But the advantage was that they would have actually flown over Cuba to actually do more softening of Castro's forces and where the military assets were. A couple of assets that survived the attack that were super critical, aviation assets. Cuba had some T-33s that were actually armed with 50 caliber machine guns, 2 T-33 jets. They had 2 Sea Furies that had 20 and 40 millimeter cannon, British aircraft, that Cuba had bought. The Cuban government before Castro had bought when the U.S. embargoed Cuba from buying American weapons. So the UK, England, actually sold replacement ordnance like bombs, rockets, and munitions. I think it was 4 Sea Furies and also some helicopters made by Westland, which was the equivalent of the S-55 Sikorsky as well. So with those 2 survivors, 1-on-1, it was enough to counter the Cuban Air Force, the rebel Air Force, the invasion, because the B-26s had such a long leg to fly from Nicaragua that they had to give up some of the protective firepower on board, like to be able to fire to the rear. And they had actually, the nose cone was actually for strafing. It was you have 8 50 caliber machine guns, which actually played a role in how the U.S., the Kennedy administration, decided not to support it, because the Cuban government said those planes are not Cuban, stolen by Cuban pilots, because our planes have the bubble canopy, the bubble nose, or the B-26s, or the real Cuban Air Force.
So Castro had the older version of the B-26,
That's
not
correct.
the newer one, strafing machine.
Right, which were the ones that
That was
eventually
the
were
attack
using.
version.
Yeah, they became the A-26s. Those planes actually were planes that were taken from the Alabama National Guard, and some of the pilot trainers, some of them actually died fighting over the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Why was it picked that they went from
Nicaragua.
the port in Cuba, which was close to you guys? from
Why
the
did they
port?
change?
When did the change happen?
What happened was they felt that the port in itself was compromised. If you remember from World War II, when they were deciding on D-Day, the Germans always expected the Americans to land either in Pas-de-Calais, because they have ports,
Yeah.
or Cherbourg, which was a port. But they decided to go through Normandy, which was an open beach. It was the same type of mentality, I guess. So they actually moved it from Trinidad, which was a town,
Yeah.
and it was a historical town. It was one of the third or fourth oldest towns in the Western Hemisphere, founded by the Spaniards. Very picturesque. Today it's a World Heritage Site by the UN, because it's got a lot of the old architecture from the days of the Spanish colony. So they moved it to Bahia de Cochinos, which is actually a swamp in Zapata, which is the biggest swamp in Cuba, filled with crocodiles and alligators, snakes. Very difficult to get in and out, which if you have an overwhelming force landing and you control the entrance, fine if you support it. But in this case, when the fellows landed, when the fighters landed, they lost the two ships with the additional tanks and ammunition. The planes got shut down. They kept asking the American Navy that was close by for support, and the only support they got was a flyby. They were not authorized to engage, even though the pilots on those American planes kept telling, please, they're massacring. There is a massacre going on the beach. These guys are surrounded. They're running out of ammunition. The Kennedy administration refused to accept the fact that they were committed. And if you are a reader of history, in a post-analysis of the action, when they had a meeting in the White House weeks later after the Bay of Pigs was a disaster, everybody had surrendered. They captured 1,200 people, besides the 200-300 that died. When there was a meeting in the White House, the chief of staff at the time, which I think he was the guy that was a paratrooper in World War II, I forget now, Maxwell Taylor, may have been the one working for the Kennedy administration, made the point saying, look, we knew that they were going to call us liars, and we knew that everybody would know that it was U.S. support. So if we want to be called all kinds of dirty names, at least let it be for the right reason, not because we abandoned these people. But that was the end of it. I mean, once they made a decision not to provide air support, the invasion could not succeed. In addition, there was another detachment that was going to land in North Cuba, in the province where I grew up. Actually, not quite close, but just to make a distraction and separate Castro's forces. But what happened, when they were waiting to land, they saw guards smoking on the beach, so they thought it was a trap. So they never landed, and they retreated. There was only 2 ships, but that would have been enough to land a couple of hundred guys well armed, and they could have taken over one of the towns, which had a good bay, which was in Nipe, where Mikado Nickel Company worked, where Chiquita had a pier. So it would have been strategically a good distraction and a good place to probably put pressure on it. By canceling that and making sure the guys in Bay of Pigs were surrounded, they were down to a one runway that they enabled that only used a couple of times, and the road that went on along the beach. An interesting tidbit of history or trivia. There was a gentleman that was in the invasion force from my hometown that at one point he was part of a reconnaissance group that was hiding in the mangroves, and they saw a tank with two jeeps come, and none other than Fidel Castro got up on top of the tank with binoculars to look at what was happening on the beach. This gentleman had a machine gun, could have killed him, and what he did, he surrendered and said, "I never fired the gun." So let me put it this way: 40 years later, when he died in Miami, nobody went to his funeral. Can you imagine an act of like July 20th bombing in Germany when they tried to kill Hitler? If they had killed Fidel at that point, the government would have collapsed.
So, guys, I was watching some of your comments on there, and I could tell that y'all like that that video. The longer format, and yes, you are correct, Roots of E. You're, as we know, history is pinpricked in school. What you're going to be taught and what you're not, what you really need to know. As we get older in life and we watch videos, we are taught, or the actual people that were there have a better view of the history because they lived it. And this is really what I've wanting to do with this channel, is show history from the personal point of view. It's like World War II. You know, World War II was so well filmed, so well documented, but was it really well documented? And the Korean War, that's another war that everybody's kind of like brushed under the table and forgotten. There's more to the video itself, and I hope to be able to give you guys a little bit more tidbits. This particular subject is very, it touches our heart in this family. We still have some family in Cuba. And I even touch about it on our conversation that I have with my father about it. If anybody wants to know, my father's name is Juan Antonio Vega Sr. And he left Cuba in 1961, right after the Bay of Pigs. There are like... they were afraid, yeah, there's an iffy on that. And there's so much conversation that needs to go on with this subject so much. Bay of Pigs, like I said, was a perfect and brilliant disaster. The Eisenhower administration was committed to helping the rebel force, and they were, but the thing is that yes, even though Batista was a bad man, there was other ways of executing the mission. You're going to hear in that video, after the video is cut together, a lot more. And during the next couple of weeks, maybe you'll see little excerpts that I'll play in shorts, so you can see what's coming up. It's going to take me a while to put it together, because again, I'm going through a lot of old photos, some letters. Just think of it this way. This is the box that my grandfather had in his house, and all of it is full of kind of like his, life in Cuba. I'm going to play one more video sheet, and it's a story that I asked my father about how is it his concept of what was supposed to happen. So if you look over my, I guess, this shoulder here, right there, you'll see the tail of the Aerocoup, and I asked him about what was the whole story behind that video, and I'm sorry about that whole, about you guys trying, you and Papito. Papito is my uncle. He's also known as the Conejo because he's got big ears, and he was always known that way growing up in Cuba, and to this day, everybody around Miami of that era knows my uncle as the Conejo. So everybody, that was his nickname. So I'm going to play that version so you guys can kind of see a little bit more, and then that'll be the end for us today. But let me just go ahead and pull this one up for you, and let's watch that video together. Bear with me one moment as I look for it.
When did Grandpa get into, start from the beginning, when Grandpa started in aviation was when you were born, right?
Yes. Actually, let me go to the beginning. My father was born in 1908, Jose Antonio. He was born to a merchant family there.
Sorry about that, guys. Actually, this is not that video. I don't think I have that video uploaded yet. This is actually a little bit of history of my grandfather, so you guys can get a sense of what my grandfather was. But I'm not going to play this video yet. We're going to hold off on this one, and we'll play it at a later date. I want to, next week, we'll delve a little bit more into Cuba's history of aviation. Like I said, this is something that's very important to me. I've been wanting to put this on video and wanted you guys to listen to more of it. I would like it if you guys could do me a favor. Those of you who are watching the video, please share the video. Share this content with your friends and ask them to join us. Remember, we're here. It is every Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. Next week we will talk about more of what. So when did my grandfather get into aviation? I'm sure you guys want to know, And I'm going to show you guys some more stuff. My grandfather getting into the aviation business. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I know you guys will be wanting to listen to it. Again, guys, I really appreciate you joining tonight's broadcast. It really means a lot to me. And again, if you could, share the video. Put your thumbs up in the bound and on that screen. Make sure you click the thumbs up to show the like. It helps out with that algorithm and kind of steers more people towards my way. For those of you who have been sharing my videos, I thank you very, very much. To all my new subscribers, I really do appreciate it. It makes me feel proud that people like the content that I put on. And I really do appreciate the love and support that we get from this channel. and it makes me feel good. This past weekend, I flew my F-86. I got a video out about that one, and I flew the Spitfire, which I will put a video out on that one. I'll put probably a short video, kind of like the showing of the highlights, you know. And maybe I'll put out another little feeler on YouTube of a little bit of the conversation with my father. But again, I hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope the rest of your week goes well. And we'll catch you on the next video. Remember, thumbs up, press the subscribe button, and if you can, follow me over here at Patreon. There you're going to see more content on this subject. Cuban aviation is going to be the theme of this next couple of podcasts coming out. And I hope to do more of these types of podcasts where we dive deeper into either Cuban aviation, South American aviation, and Central American aviation. It is a subject that's not dealt or spoken about a lot. And I'd like to get into those nitty-gritty areas about it, and maybe end up trying to get some guys that we can have some live interviews with here on this broadcast. So, again, thank you very much for joining tonight, guys. I will see you guys on the next one. Everyone have a great night, a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Thank you, EQRC. Trevor, thank you very much for joining. Roots of E. And Norm, I really appreciate you joining us also. Thank you very much for coming in. And we will see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys.